This stream has been a little while in the making, and I'm so excited to be able to launch today this roundtable discussion of the role of the Chief Community Officer. What's it all about? What is the professional path to get there? And what is its prognosis for the future? Is it more of a fractional role, a full-time role? Is it viable for leadership teams? And is it for every organization? We're going to address these questions and more with our wonderful group of heads of community, chief community officers, coming up on today's episode of Talk About Your Community. Kalisa, roll the credits. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you may happen to be. You've tuned into Clocktower Advisors Talk About Your Community. On this show, we bring in all kinds of guests with levels of expertise around community and community building, online, offline, and my favorite, the hybrid style of community. And we try to bring in people from a lot of different disciplines to talk about their roles and how it has an impact on connecting people together to create meaning, to create new products, ideas, to be joyful about the work that they do. And so today is an extra special stream, and I know we've had a wonderful response to it with people who've signed up to tune in. This is the Chief Community Officer Roundtable event, and so I'm very excited. I'm going to bring on the group here without any further ado. First of all, my partner in doing this interview series, my dear friend Jay Washington is here. Jay with Birdie in the Hand Consulting and head of community for Headspace. Jay, welcome. Great to see you today.
Thank you so much, Todd. I'll let you guys know right now that I'm in the airport, but I would not have missed this for the world. So excited to hear from great minds and learn and grow together. Thank you.
I'm so excited you're able to join us. I know you maybe can be with us for just a limited time because you're on the road and in the air and kind of moving around, but I'm just bringing everyone else into the meeting here so we can meet up. Just a quick round of introductions for everybody. Hugo Paquin, fractional partnerships lead for Voyagers.io, climate tech enthusiast, community builder. Katie Bappel, former CCO for Building Brave, community for women entrepreneurs. Also former director of community management for Higher Logic and wonderful chief community officer executive. Brian Kling, another executive in community, customer experience, digital innovation expert. George CLC Samuels, CCO, serial entrepreneur, head of FIA Collective, and so many more things that I probably can't name. And just really brilliant guy. And then finally, who couldn't join us today, Racine Malcolm, who was also part of the interview process. She's the CCO and Chief Executive Officer currently of Everyspace. Before we get underway, I just wanted to say a quick congratulations. George just had his wedding this weekend. So excited for you, man. Wonderful that you're able to join us so soon after that occurred. But just wanted to wish you all the best, man. Great to see you. So as we get underway today, this group has come together individually. Jay and I had the opportunity to interview each one of you solo and get your feelings and your history for your role as a head of community or a chief community officer or executive. The titles tend to vary. The responsibilities are similar, as I'm sure we'll be discussing. But I wanted a chance to maybe go around, give you each a chance to maybe say a little bit about something you're excited about in the world of community building right now, or maybe just about your summer, how that's going, just by way of a quick introduction. And then we'll get into the meat of talking a little bit about the role of the CCO on the executive team and sort of what that relationship has been maybe for each of you and reflections that you've had since the time that we had our interview, which now is maybe, I guess, about 2-3 months ago when we last connected. Jay, do you want to get us started?
As far as introductions or what happened during my
Sure.
summer, or okay,
Yeah.
well, I am really grateful for just this year has been rich with conversation. I think as a community builder and someone who is very intentional about connection and how that looks. I've had the privilege of having conversations with individuals in all aspects of community, whether cross functional partners, leaders, curious. And so, like this group, really grateful. That's the airport. Very grateful for humans and the unexpected conversations that can bubble up.
That's wonderful, Jay. Hugo, you're next on my screen. Why don't I give you the spotlight then?
Yeah, thanks. Hello, everyone. So, what I'm excited about in my life, I'm actually flying on Friday back to Canada, my homeland. I'm in Germany now, so that's my annual pilgrimage. Excited about that. It's one time a year to see my family, and this time around, I'm planning to give a baptism to my kids of the forest. So we're going camping, mosquitoes, the whole deal. So looking forward to that. And in terms of community, I would say I'm in good spirits about the community space. I'm very optimistic about its prospects for the future. I come at it mostly from a marketer's background, so marketing as a go-to-market strategy. And I read recently, actually this week, an article in Vogue mentioning how Gen Z, completely reinvents the marketing funnel, and community has a central space in that, in nurturing inspiration, authentic relationship, and basically connecting with customers. So I think there's a lot of the new generation, believes in community, and it's just a very a good business strategy, essentially. But that's not to say that it's all rainbows and sunshine. I think post pandemic, I think the community, went to a lot of soul searching, still going through it. So I think it's very key that we get together, like in these kind of formats, to discuss about what exactly is the role of a chief community officer, what that entails, and get some definition and clarity. But yeah, very much looking forward to this.
I definitely appreciate that point of view, and that optimism is infectious. I'm looking forward to diving into that a little further. Katie, what about you? How's your world these days?
I think one of the things that struck me the most when you brought up the question, Todd, is that looking at the faces on the screen, I've had a lot of opportunity this summer to get to know a lot of very diverse community builders and learn about how truly variable our role can be. So I'm really grateful to all of you for everything that I've learned from your own experiences and through this series. I think one of the things that strikes me the most is I think, as community builders, we kind of look at how enterprise community roles have kind of receded or have declined in importance over this year and last year. And one of the things that I found really encouraging this summer through my conversations is I see the areas that are truly investing in community, and that makes me excited still, like healthcare tech startups and Web3 companies. There's this huge demand for being community-led from the beginning. And so I think that despite the challenges we've been through, after the summer, I'm really optimistic for what comes next.
That's really fascinating. I definitely want to delve into what you see as sort of the growth areas for community right now, because I've had a similar point of view and I think revelation around that. Like a lot of the large enterprise space that kind of softened a little bit, it seems like, over the past couple of years. But now, like the creator space and the startup space really seems to be exploding, and there seems to be a lot of interest and traction that community is giving those organizations, even to drive profitability for the organization. Sometimes the community is the central product, and there are some nice examples coming out in the world of profitable communities that are occurring in the space. So I'd be really interested to get everybody's take on that. George, you want to talk a little bit about what's exciting to you at the moment? I know you've got a lot of irons in the fire.
As always, right? Yeah, it's been an interesting summer period. Of course, my own wedding has been a highlight, but fascinatingly, I ended up using WhatsApp community and just the groups to actually coordinate a lot of our wedding guests. This wasn't planned, but it just kind of happened, and it speaks to I think David Spinks talked about emergent communities, and the emergent feature of communities, I think, has always kind of been present for a lot of community builders, right? And it's not always easy to be able to explain to folks about how organic community building can be or is. And so what I noticed is that there was just, we had a social event 2 days before the wedding. And a lot of people were asking me the same questions, like separately via DM. So my entrepreneurial side, the efficiency side came out, and I was like, oh, this is highly inefficient. Let me just create a group to like answer all the questions for all those folks. And what ended up happening was a lot of things that we see in Slack channels, you know how you have like event-based channels, topic-based channels, all that sort of stuff just organically came out of the group itself. And we had about 100 guests. And by doing this, this gave the wedding guests actually a unique experience. One, they didn't know that WhatsApp communities existed. And then two, that we had a lot of solo travelers. So they had an opportunity to connect together. So I'm probably going to write a blog post about this because it was really fascinating to see. Yeah, so that was, I think, one of the main highlights already. And the second one was being invited as an advisor for this other meme coin project. Generally, I stay away from like crypto stuff. And have since about late 2018, because I was heavily involved in Bitcoin, right? We've had these conversations. But this particular one is really fascinating because I think this younger generation, they're starting to see how, memes aren't enough. Like it's good to have fun, but you want to have real impact. And I've been pleasantly surprised by this younger generation. And so, I'm moving into my older stage of my life. And it's really fascinating. I think I'm like starting to accept that like I'm older. Some of these memes and things and like that they're sharing, I'm like not getting anymore, and I'm just like, yep, okay, I'm in the older category now.
Well, welcome to the team,
Sure,
old,
yeah.
my friend.
Seasoned. We don't say old, we say seasoned, because
Seasoned, I like
in the journey we cook up quite a bit, but it's important to make sure you sprinkle a little wisdom along the way.
I love that, Jay. Thank you. Brian, what about you? What's new in your world?
So again, what's one thing? So I'm looking forward to going back to the Bay Area in August, visiting family. So we'll be in Petaluma, probably get into the city here and there. So I'll see if I can try to connect in with any activities going there while I'm out there. We'll see. So I'm looking forward to that. And then another event actually is the Community-Led World Summit in London, which is the week after next. So I'm looking forward to that because I'll see some faces that I've known for a while, and looking forward to meeting some people I've known that I haven't met in person. So that's going to be fun. And then maybe mirroring what Katie was talking about. So, currently I'm sort of looking at my next opportunities, and in Europe, what I see as, there's a lot of Web3, especially in Switzerland. There's the crypto alley in the Zug area. But I am seeing, like in the US, there are some pretty high profile roles that have come out in the last number of months, like at Figma, Notion, Autodesk. So there are some pretty big roles that have been, I'm not typical. Anyway, I'm not going for all those roles, but anyway, there's lots of people in the US also who are in the market. So, more power to them, and best of luck on those.
That's great. I'll just point out to everybody on the stream who's tuned in to watch or who tune in afterwards. In the description is a LinkedIn link to everybody's profiles. So if you want to visit them or connect or have some further conversations after today's stream, I'm sure they'd all welcome those connections and conversations to come about. Jay, you've been my partner through this whole interview series. I've been so grateful for the wisdom and warmth that you've brought to these conversations. Now that we're on the other side of all these interviews, and you've had a little time to maybe marinate in the ideas, what's kind of on your mind? What would you like to maybe put to the group as a question? Any ideas or things on your mind?
Thank you, Todd Fodder. Oh, I love that nickname so much. Lately, I've been pondering on the idea of community work, often feeling like thankless work, but no less fruitful work. And so I would really love to ask this group about how in their journey there has been an idea planted as a community strategist, community builder, community leader. When was there a time that you planted a seed where you weren't very sure if there was going to be a harvest, what sort of motivated you to continue in this sort of mission around community? And if there was some sort of positive outcome, some fruitfulness in that seed being planted, how did that allow you to manifest or realize whatever vision or idea started in the said seed? I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Well, I think there's a clear tie, I think, to the interviews that I listened to from each of you. I think something that we all talked about was how community kind of can feel like a struggle at times, especially within enterprise or within the various places where we've learned community over the years. So I think that the whole part of this conversation has been like, well, how do you succeed as a community leader? And I think that we all come to the table with certain seeds or ideas that we feel in our hearts are the absolute best thing that we can do for our constituents, so for our community members, for our audiences. And we have the relentless pursuit in order to pursue those regardless of the number of no's that we get. And so I think that's sort of part of the pushback that you're talking about, Jay, but I'm pretty sure everybody touched on this at some point. I feel like the attributes that make us sitting here today and have had the opportunities that we've had is because it isn't the no's that push us down. It's the no's that motivate us and challenge us to look at something and figure out 50 different ways to do the same thing. And let the transparency show that as a human being, as somebody vulnerable to trying to do something special that maybe isn't getting by really easily, we can actually build stronger communities through that transparency by doing it with the people that we're helping to build for. So I think, there's a lot of no's, there's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of thankless work and people that only want the outcomes and not the talk in between, which is okay. And I totally understand that. But I think we're in this, at least I'm in this, for the big moments at the end that you finally get to after all of the hard work. And I think the harder it is and the number of roadblocks that you sort of come up on, that's kind of what makes it more worth it. That's why I love community leadership positions, is because there's always this understanding and internal evangelism that you need to build in order to get to the end and really see how you have the runway in order for those seeds to grow.
Beautiful and well articulated answer to a question that was a little garbled. Thank you.
I love your questions.
I was going to say one thing that comes to mind for me is in one of my more recent roles. So large global company wasn't using NPS in anywhere in the company that I was aware of, and I started using an annual NPS survey. And so I wanted to make sure that we were deliberate around how can we show that we're actually moving the needle on that. So we were very focused, laser focused and specific. I wanted to, try this out if we could really see moving the needle. So we took the open customer feedback, took 3 of the biggest pain points, focused on projects for the entire year. And then, the hope was, are we going to see a change at the end of the year? So it was a big risk. But actually, luckily, it worked out really well. The NPS score increased by 2.5x. And we actually had open comments where they actually mentioned specifically the projects that we had worked on to improve things. So that was a real, it was taking a risk, but it's in the service of trying to show value. It turned out really well. So just keeping that customer focus and trusting in the process, and then keeping your fingers crossed that some of the numbers and the open comments work. So
yes, I appreciate that, Brian.
I would actually tie in those two input from Katie and Brian. So I think the role of a chief community officer, a lot of it is planting different seeds, not always knowing what will bloom, right? So having the backing of your management, that's key to run those experiments. And really, once something has traction, then you focus on that and you scale it essentially. And that often comes actually through survey. I'm a big survey guy. I mean, not everybody enjoys that. I not that I every month type thing, but like twice a year at least. And then that's also planting a seed to your members that you want that feedback, but that you're creating also expectations that you're going to deliver on that. So, but I think that's so precious. I always say that's gold, or that's like for community managers, that feedback is such a vital data point that you can then use to run those experiments, because it's, you know, based on actual data and input from your community. So I think in both those sense, it's like running experiments, but also in a structured way that's, you know, using data and your community itself to co-design it.
I appreciate you all running with the garden analogy, because for me, it was given to me in a conversation once. And so often organizations and even ourselves, we have this expectation around instant results or instant gratification. And, you know, gardeners plant seeds and rely and leave them relying that the sun and the water and the environment around them, the fertilizer, the bowl, will all ultimately serve us in a way that will allow us to reap the rewards of the harvest. So I just really appreciate that analogy being, you know, grabbed and held on to.
So I'd love to build on that because there's a question that came up. I had a wonderful networking interview this morning with a chief customer officer, Stephen Cronin, and he and I were talking a little bit about you know, our experiences with executive teams, or particularly chief executive officers, who have this extreme sales focused, short term view of value and sort of what they're trying to drive. Have you guys encountered? Have you as individually encountered this, and how have you addressed it? Because I think what came out of our conversation this morning is, wow, maybe that's just not the right organization. You know, maybe it's just a mismatch to work with that organization. Or, I mean, if you're embedded in a company and you kind of run up against that emphasis on acquisition, the next sale, and there's no gardener metaphor of, you know, the long-term success. How do you address that? Because I mean, you're the head of community. You're the champion you're the champion gardener. But you know, how do you address that particular challenge in an organization?
Maybe I'll take a crack at this one.
Yeah.
I think, you know, it's hard to do community without acknowledging the role of culture. And, you know, I just see these sales oriented companies it's just a highly competitive culture. And I think the way that I've been able to navigate culture over the span of my career has just to look at everything as just different cultures. You know, they all have their own language, they all have their own artifacts, rituals, etc. And so when I think some people are maybe having a hard time with those type of cultures or environments, it's because there's a mismatch of like your cultural tendencies versus theirs. You know, community builders, I think, come from a certain cultural leaning, right? So we will favor or even try to foster a cultural garden that reflects that, right? And, you know, all businesses go through different stages of growth too. And I think over time, some of those environments will shift as well, right? We're seeing this very clearly with Apple, right? If you guys remember that Crush It commercial that came out recently, there was a big mismatch between, right, that commercial and I think the cultural resonance of the market with Steve Jobs. So there's a culture under Apple with Steve Jobs, and there's a culture under Apple with Tim Cook, but the outside market hasn't shifted to the Apple with Tim Cook yet. And so I think a lot of times, you know, this is where like a lot of our biases for culture come in. And I think we need to kind of acknowledge that when we're looking at these different communities, that we have to acknowledge our own cultural bias and then try to, as much as possible, objectively look at the culture there. Because I think what I found is that some people will deem another culture as toxic, but the people in that culture don't see it that way, right? That's their culture, you know? And I think I've learned to not really look at, you know, certain cultures as better or worse. It's just different in general. You know, it's just like when you go to a different country, right? Each country has their own values, language, cooking, clothing style. And based on what your tendencies are, you'll either resonate with that or not. And so that's generally how I look at it these days.
Bam, bam, bam. Those are all jams. All jams. Thank you.
I think part of it too can be, making sure that you have a roadmap, right? So that you have short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals, so that they feel like you're making some progress in some way. And then, but you're also tying it into the longer-term goal is if you do these steps, we're going to get to this bigger, thing that we're trying to reach, which takes time, and we can't do that in 3 months kind of thing. So it's how can you break down some of these longer term goals, or maybe tie in, I mean, not maybe, you need to tie in some of your goals with, of course, business goals and the other parts of the business. So how can you do that and try to make a kind of a holistic roadmap?
I think anybody in a customer facing position kind of knows, especially if you're like in the technology industry, that replacing customers is a lot harder than keeping them. And I think that really, I understand that sales job is kind of the antithesis of that. Their job is to bring in new customers. So that's not the focus. But I do think that there's a fundamental and educational misunderstanding as far as how community can aid to the efforts of what a sales team is trying to achieve, rather than having them be at odds against each other. And I've definitely been a part of orgs where I've had communities fail because they were acquired by companies that were so focused on the sales machine that it disillusioned the community. And ultimately, it didn't matter what numbers you could come back with. But the strongest point that can be made in that instance is making sure that you understand the dollar figures around things like retention, dollar figures around various alternative revenue channels that are available to your organization that absolutely exist. Things like upsells, increasing annual recurring revenue. It depends on what your model is, but I really think once you know the business from just the holistic business perspective, and you can figure out how you apply community to the bigger picture, then that's where you kind of have the key to finding out the right data to kind of be friends with sales and be partners, where you're all trying to kind of, achieve the same thing. You're just doing it in different ways. And there's a lot of respect to have for one another. It's just, in order to understand that respect, there's an educational piece, I think.
It is so refreshing to hear leaders who get it. Like just the language that you use, just the correlations that you create, just the kind of confidence in and clarity in not only the mission and outcomes, but about the core principles of community. Like it's just so freaking refreshing to hear it. What keeps you motivated when you are less well received, when you are less welcome in the rooms with other leaders who either don't get it or, quite frankly, don't care about community? How do you navigate those spaces?
I mean, to circle back to Brian's point. There's a reason if you're a chief community officer, there's a reason you're there, and that's probably because there's a shared belief in the culture of the company that there's a reason for you to be there, and it's all about how you weave that into the business goals. I mean, if you're in the business, then of course there's business imperatives, which is to generate revenue and stay afloat, right? So how does community feed into that? So I think there's always politics and there's always believers to different extents, but if you're a chief community officer and you can justify how you bring business, how you keep business through loyalty, as Katie mentioned, I think then the proof is in the pudding, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're in this position, you have to know how to build community internally first. And so that means doing the hard work of getting to really know who your biggest champions are and who your biggest detractors are, and understanding the why, because until you understand the why, it's going to be really hard to figure out how you align their objectives with how the community can help support those objectives. So I think, ultimately you're going to find detractors regardless of where you go. I don't think there's a single company where everybody, I don't think everybody's against community, but I think, they don't understand it. And so it's hard to set aside time in order just to be an avid supporter. So I think that's the key. No matter what role you are, no matter what company you go into, you have to take the time to be humble and learn about how you build community internally first.
I love that. Be an avid supporter. I love the focus on. I think at this level of leadership, being the head of community or chief community officer, means by necessity, you need to be attuned to the other parts of the organization, the different departments, the different leadership teams, the personalities that are there, because I think we really are in a big way the keepers of the flame, for the culture and beliefs of the organization, that we because we are representing community externally, it's very important that we internalize that and know how to communicate that well. We are the master storytellers for the enterprise in that way. Just in the way that, if there's a chief community officer, that might as well be our title in a lot of cases too, because I think that's what we work in. I love that so much.
I think alluding to what George was talking about too with culture is, part of it is just establishing trust. So when you're in a new organization, you just need to keep doing the work, doing what you say you're going to do, showing up on time, just the simple things. And then also, part of my interview was also talking about when you have a detractor, you have an opportunity there. Not, you also can circle the wagons with your supporters, but you also have an opportunity to, as we all know, if you can turn that detractor into a promoter, sometimes they're your biggest fan. So there's an opportunity there to have an open conversation one-to-one and, acknowledge, hey, we're both trying to do the best for the company here. Let's see how we can build some connections and how we can work together to make that happen and how we can have a better relationship going forward. So.
Yeah, I'd love to add on to that. And like well said, Brian, because I've experienced that a lot where different companies are often afraid of those types of individuals or, like criticism and those sort of things. But I think for the strongest community builders I've seen, they've been able to take those individuals or those incidences and turn it around and make those folks the best or even strongest advocates. And there's a skill in that, right? Not everybody's able to do that. Now at scale, of course, it's a bit harder, but they are definitely opportunities. And, as gardeners, we're just kind of having to always observe, wait, and respond to those sort of situations. Another one that I wanted to add was that, like, I find myself often interpreting, again, using the sort of cultural lens, right? When traveling even between different countries, I find myself having to interpret or translate a lot of these community concepts that we're really well versed on, and it comes intuitively to us, then using the language of the culture that we're going into to be able to communicate with different departments or even like, the customer base or audiences. So I find myself doing a lot of that sort of translation in order to be a bridge between groups.
Yeah, it's community evangelism, right? I'm in Europe, and it has a different meaning here than it does in the US. I mean, we're still at the community as like a social media manager a few years back here. So there's always that myth busting, and maybe often I think also false understanding of what community is. So, it can be poo-pooed if a sales guy comes, oh yeah, community, they're just like there to manage the Twitter account, or it's a customer success person. So I think there's a way that you always need to, as you say, interpret or translate or evangelize, I guess, when you truly believe and when you know the kind of business value you can generate. So it's an opportunity, totally.
It's not a role for the faint of heart, is it? I mean, there's quite a lot of interpretation, of education, of being a bridge between people. I mean, I think it takes a special personality to be successful in this role that manages up and within an organization in the way that we do. It's kind of turning my head to the question of, man, the time is just flying by here. The skill sets that are necessary to grow into this kind of role, from a day-to-day moderator and community manager up into a more managerial leadership evangelist kind of role. What makes or breaks somebody, being on this career path?
Great question, Todd. Great question.
I think part of it is being a connector. So, you initially, when community is more new, you're learning about the community, you're trying things, practicing things, but then when you want to go to the next level, you need to see, how can I connect to other parts of the business? Like, I'm in a traditional one is, how can I connect with the support team? How can we build a holistic support strategy, one-to-many and one-to-one? As Katie talked about earlier, how can we hook into the sales team? see what they're trying to accomplish and how can community help them in that path. And even coming up with, different ideas, like the one organization I was in, there were different groups doing support around the world, but there was no one running support for the organization. So they were disconnected. So I proposed that we had a digital support summit, and we tried to, it's kind of funny, like you're in the company and you're actually reaching out, trying to find out where are all the support groups. Did I get them all? I'm not sure. But then you bring them all together. We had like 4 half-day sessions, and we brought in an external speaker, but we started with an introduction. I gave each one of them a PowerPoint template so that, you don't have one group that wants to talk for an hour and one that has like 5 seconds worth of content. So you give them a template, tell us what you do, who's on your team, what are you proud of, what are some of the challenges you have, and then it's a time to celebrate, and learn about who your other colleagues are. And then we tried to identify common issues, and then afterwards, some of the outcomes were, how can we work on these together to solve problems that we all have, and then it gets better for everyone. So, it's kind of connecting and also thinking about what are other things the company might need that we just haven't even done yet. Yeah.
To build on that, I think, this kind of echoes what you said a little bit, Brian, but I think having the ability to be curious and extremely interpersonal savvy is really necessary in order to understand how you can build community strategy and build a roadmap intentionally. So until you understand the objectives of various departments inside your organization, until you understand how to tie those to the objectives that you're hearing from your audience and who you're building community for, it's really hard to not spin out and just do things because that's what you did at a previous community, or that's what you see somebody else saying that they did and it worked out really well. That isn't necessarily how successful community building works in my mind. So I think it's also the ability to have a growth mindset on top of that and figure out, how do I do something differently than how I've done it before? How do I look at this idea and continue to iterate upon it to make sure it makes more sense for everybody who's a stakeholder, community and internal? So I think that there's a lot of variables where you have to be constantly willing to change. Like, we all have to be chameleons and figure out how we need to adapt to different personalities, different needs, different departments, and how to change that and deal with ambiguity, another skill, when something needs to be, when something changes. Ultimately, emotions change, behaviors change, needs change, products change. And so I feel like those are really big things. One more thing I'll add, because I'm getting long-winded and I know we have a lot more to talk about, is that I think vision's important. If I didn't have leaders that had great vision, if there weren't moments in my career where a great idea didn't pop in, I could see, having a team sitting dead in the water and not being utilized to their full potential. And I think at this level, if we're not proving our value constantly, we don't have the numbers to back it up, we don't have the results to back it up, it makes it exceptionally hard to win fans, like we were talking about in the previous question.
Really beautifully said, Katie. Thank you for that. So I see we're in the process of losing Jay here. It looks like she's about to board her flight. It was amazing that she was able to join us for as long as she is. Maybe we'll still get her for another minute or so. I wanted to throw this question out to you as well. We've been talking about sort of like the skills and success factors for being in this role and delivering value. Does anybody have a favorite CEO they've ever worked with, or most difficult CEO that they feel comfortable talking about? Obviously not naming any names, but how did you work with this individual? Maybe they were super easy to work with, or maybe they were really difficult to work with. But what was the experience that you had?
I'll mention one actually that popped into my head. So in the beginning of my career, I was at Autodesk and was asked to manage the strategy and programs for Autodesk community, which is a very old community and a very large community. And one thing I thought was quite interesting is we launched a advocate program. And in the early days, we had, they still have an annual conference in Las Vegas. I think actually this year it's in San Diego or something, but we decided we wanted to invite the CEO to come. And at the time it was Carl Bass. And we thought, he's meeting with so many big customers and all this, he's just going to pop in for like 5 minutes. And he actually came and stayed like an hour. And even, people wanted to have pictures with him, selfies with him and stuff. And he was hanging out and talking the talk and then, hanging around for pictures and stuff. It was so great. It was so fantastic to see him involved because, as we know, in these communities, you have people that are spending a lot of their free time helping lots of other people, and we try to give value back. We build these advocate programs to see bidirectional value, but I mean, lots of people get jazzed when they can hang out with the CEO and actually have a conversation and a picture. Sometimes that's all some people need. Other people need other things, but for some people that's great, and it's nice to see that attention from the very top level of the company. So I'd mentioned Carl.
I think the best CEO I've worked with and the most difficult are the same person. And I think that I mean the most difficult as a compliment. When I was at Building Brave as Chief Community Officer, I was on the phone on Zoom with my CEO, Mary Burke, 4 hours a day at least. And so we got a lot of FaceTime together. And something that she was really good at that I realized that I hadn't learned how to do well yet, which I think is really valuable, is how to have such a strong growth mindset that you could try something the week before, get that initial data, and decide to throw it out the window and just do something completely different. And it really admired me that she was able to and willing to make decisions that quickly, even if it cost more money, even if it rapidly changed how we had communicated things. So in a way, it made everybody's life harder because we had to hurry up and pivot and communicate to people. But it also instilled this idea that when you're a part of this company, when you are a customer of this company, we'll quickly always do the right thing and make sure that we do it with speed because it's the right thing to do. And so being able to be that agile and move that quickly is a lesson that I learned, where usually I would sit there and analyze and overanalyze for a little bit and like, oh, I need more data, I need to know. So I think that it's a remarkable thing when somebody who is this deep into community that affects so many people can be this honest and open and vulnerable and make it clear, like, this is why we make change and this is why we do it so quickly.
On my end, my former CEO, so I used to work, I worked for 5 years. That's where I entered the community world, actually, for a open innovation hub. So the gist of it is that we built up a startup community to match them with corporate customers, so help them solve their business issues. And I started out as a head of marketing, but the need for community was obvious. And then my CEO was somewhat of a believer, so I transitioned into a community role based on our conversations and his vision. So I think that, again, we talked about having some runway to run experiments, and I think we both saw that this was a needed function to have within that organization. And again, I think that's worth so much when you can get that backing of your CEO or C-level crew to run community as you see fit.
Yeah, I'd add to that, plus one to that, because when I was working with the last corporate I was at, we had helped them, and I think I shared this with you guys before, right? But had helped them implement Slack as Slack's first enterprise customer in Asia Pacific. And that would not have happened if the CEO wasn't open to anything related to communities or agile development, etc. So the company was going through a transformation, and the CEO had a very unique mix of skill sets that allowed him to kind of go from the small details all the way up to the high level strategic. And I thought that was great, because I could see just how many people were resistant in the company. And Slack often makes its way, or has made its way, into companies from a bottom-up approach, right? It starts out with developers, they just start using, and then all of a sudden, IT and the execs just like have to adopt it. And so it was very interesting, because that was around 2016. But if we didn't have the exec support, that definitely wouldn't have happened. And I think for community builders, it's always about finding those right type of advocates, at different levels of the organization. And I think a lot of us have also stumbled upon or stumbled into community roles, because that was not something I ever thought I'd be doing as a career, out of high school.
I don't know that any of us had, this is one of those emergent career categories. I think emergent comes out again as a topic. For me is that's some of the excitement and enticement of the space. Like we're living on the frontier here of a new kind of interaction and and using digital as that intermediary space for conversation and connection. We're still figuring all of that out. So we're running a little low on time here. I wanted to give each of you a chance to reflect on maybe what I believe Katie brought up in the beginning of the conversation, or maybe even before we got online. But that idea that what is the state of community right now as far as an adoption by organizations? I think we pointed to a little bit of a dichotomy between enterprise community and startup or creator style communities. What's your prognosis? How do you think the technology is going to change? It's an open-ended question. Would love to understand your thoughts and wisdom about where you see things going.
Sure,
So,
I'll take it. Oh, Brian, go for it. No, please go for it.
I was just going to say, I mean, I do see, it seems like there's more platforms coming out, to serve the Web3 and creator space, that type of thing. I will just say that for the enterprise space, I think, or I wish someone would disrupt the existing platforms a bit to challenge them to, step up a bit more strongly. Yeah, and yeah, kind of what I talked about before. I mean, I see a few like really high profile enterprise level roles that are popping up now and then, but still, you definitely feel that there's a lot of people in community who are, in between roles right now. So I think there's a challenge there. And then, yeah, as you said, on the ground, the creator communities, I'm seeing more of these kind of creator things, and people are talking about how you can have a community of interest where people are paying a monthly fee, as you talked about, like, monetizing community as well. And that's not always a bad thing, right? Because if you're creating lots of value and it's like a closed community for those people that really want to get in there and be with other people and learn something together, and they're sharing a lot of value, it's totally worthwhile. So I think we're seeing different models, new models emerging more strongly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. State of community. It's an interesting one because I've gone through a lot of different identities, in my career. When I first started out, I was a developer. Then I was an animator. So I actually started out in the creative space. And then I moved into sales, then business development, and then I stumbled into community, right? So I've never been too wedded to the titles as much. Community and culture has been something that has just come from my Polynesian side. That's something that already existed in my family, right? And I just found it fascinating that in business, they were starting to talk about these things, right? And so I think the only thing that I had to learn better early on in my career was translating a lot of these things that I grew up with into business speak, right? To translate everything into ROI, how are you going to make money from it? How is this useful, et cetera? Get very practical, because I think a lot of us, this may come naturally. And so, often, again, we're translating or interpreting a lot of these intuitive things in very practical environments, right? And so what I've noticed is at this point in time, there's been a shift for a lot of community folks into GTM. And we spoke about this before, right? Where Common Room, they're a platform that started out for community, but they really found their niche with GTM teams. And it's been fascinating to watch because I was going through this with my own company, and we were noticing the same, that really when you kind of peel back the desires from a lot of clients who come for community help, in action and in reality, when you work with them, really what they're wanting is like GTM help, right? And this can come at different stages of business. At least that's been the experience for me. Is that it's a lot of activities related to go to market, and the higher you go, it then would shift into more like culture transformation, digital transformation, change management, those sort of things. And so I was like, all right, obviously you need to kind of shift things. And I would say right now, I probably focus less on the community aspect, and I've been finding myself talking and relating more to prospects around the culture aspect. Which is probably why it was a good thing for us to discuss a little. And this culture aspect is a very intangible thing. I think community folks are familiar with like the issue of translating intangible things to businesses. And it's just, I think I've become a lot more fascinated by it, especially in our tech-heavy world, because it's something that is all there, and it like impacts and influences so much. So in terms of the state of community, that's where I see it right now. That's been my experience. And so I'll probably be looking at community from a culture plus tech lens moving forward.
For the state of community, I'm going to wait for Todd's breakdown of the CMX community industry report, or just a quick plug. No, but
I'm very behind on that, my friend.
You said like we're on the frontier, and that's interesting because to my sense, I identify with what George is saying. It's like community is as old as time, right? It's basically nurturing human relationship. Of course, in a business sense, it's kind of it emerged as a new discipline, I would say. A few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, pandemic really made it like a buzzword, right? Like nowadays, I think it's still a lot of it is buzzword. But if you use the Gartner hype cycle sort of thinking, we're kind of in the through of disillusionment, I think, post-pandemic. So meaning a lot of community professionals are perhaps, relabeling to go to market or customer advocacy, customer success, or marketing simply because those skill sets are translatable. So, but I do believe the future is bright. So I mentioned on the outset that this Gen Z, right, like their creator economy, that's all Web3. It's all frontier stuff, but it's really showing us what the future is going to look like, and it's much more fluid. But at the end of the day, it's all humans connecting. And how does that happen? How does that connect to the business goals? I think community professionals are directly at the heart of it. So I think there's really a business case for it. And going forward, I do believe in it.
That's wonderful, man. I'll just mention as an aside, I haven't done a breakdown of the CMX report from this year. However, I would direct everyone to take a look at Venia Logan's very cogent review of CMX methodology, as well as some of the other platform spaces. To me, it is indicative of a move towards maturing the methodology and approach of those reports. And so I'm looking forward to seeing more there. But just a quick shout out to my friend Venia from Socially Constructed, who does some really terrific work from a sociological lens. Cool. I don't know if anyone else wanted to chime in on the future of community. Please go ahead. That's just an aside.
Well, there's three. Sorry, George.
No, go for it, Katie.
There's three things that I'd like to add. I think first is I've seen a lot of companies even trying to build micro communities these days, which is something that surprised me and is an interesting trend. George, I think you posted about this, so I was surprised you didn't say it, so I wanted to plug that in there. Look at George's LinkedIn profile. He says so many interesting things about ancient communities and micro communities, by the way, so plug for you, George. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is this strong emergence and idea of making money online through paid communities, which I think to some extent has a lot of ground if you have a great idea, and to some extent is setting people up for trying things that won't be quite so successful. But you do see a lot of community platforms coming out with the emphasis being this back-end functionality that allows for paid subscriptions, paid memberships. So I'm interested to see where that goes. And by the way, if you're somebody on this that is working with paid communities, I'd be interested to learn from you because I don't have a lot of experience in that. I find that fascinating. But the third thing that I think is interesting from a career perspective for everybody is that I am starting to see a lot of freelance, or as we've talked about in our Fractional Unitas group, among most of us on this panel, is this emergence of part-time work. And 10 years ago, I looked at it and say, well, it's an unwillingness to invest in full-time resources in order to give community the support it needs. The interesting thing is that as I talk to these companies or people in these positions, it's actually the opposite. Is people that are early on that are looking to scale up and do so with any amount of budget that they can get for a community in order to ensure that what they're building is a success because they're invested in it. And I find that really intriguing. So if you've shied away from freelance opportunities before, if you've looked at them as something that might not necessarily be a fit because it's indicative of somebody only wanting part-time help, I urge you to look again because I think there's some interesting growth to happen there for our industry.
Really fabulous. So we are rapidly approaching the top of the hour here. I want to give each of you a chance to sort of give a quick closing thought or a plug for something you're working on right now that you're excited about. But just what a wonderful, far-reaching discussion. We could probably make this a regular series because there's just a lot of rich ground to till here. But I wanted to thank each of you for taking your time to connect and be a part of this interview series and to share your ideas with the world about the role of the head of community, the chief community officer, that executive leadership role that I think all of us believe is necessary to many organizations from startups through enterprise level. Couple of quick plugs before we say those final goodbyes. I wanted to give a shout out. I'm going to be doing 2 more streams in July coming up. SJ Baraconi and I are going to be talking on the 26th about the future of work and the place of online communities. He is a futurist and really brilliant guy that I've met through the Community Consultants Collective. And earlier than that, on the 12th, I'm going to be doing a live stream session with Lauren Turner and my good friend Amadou Diallo, a griot storyteller and good friend. Going to be a little bit of a different session. We are going to be playing some improv games online for everybody's entertainment and amusement, but really with the serious purpose of using improv for creativity and personal growth and being able to think and talk on your feet. I think is a wonderful skill that people in our profession need to be pretty good at. So I hope everybody tunes in for that one as well. Final plug is I'm going to be the panel facilitator for an upcoming couple of sessions on the 16th and the 18th on the art of war and business. Sun Tzu's The Art of War, having wonderful philosophical conversations with some thought leaders from around the globe on that via my friend Sai Alhir, who is a digital transformation, cultural transformation professional. I don't know how best to put him. He is a pracademic, as he terms himself. So there we are with that. Katie, Brian, Hugo, George, anything you want to share before we close off today's session?
I'll go first. I'm organizing a festival in the UK on climate tech on the 20th of September. So if there's any climate tech entrepreneurs, investors, scientists, researchers out there, come through. It's going to be 400 people, so quite intimate. I'm a big fan of these new, more smaller events types. Like 400 people is not 4,000. It's not Glastonbury, but it's this intimacy, I think, is really working wonders. And just to close, I mean, Todd, thanks a lot for doing these kinds of panels. I think it's great that you're getting us together. You're a shining light in the world of community, and your work doesn't go unnoticed. So much praise to you, sir.
Humble thank you. Appreciate it. George, go ahead.
Yeah, no, of course, would also like to say thank you to you, Todd. Appreciate you bringing us together. It's not always easy, right? While we're managing other communities and then trying to like do community stuff for ourselves or our own brands. So it's nice to have someone like you, looking out for us as well. I think last thing to share is I am working on a stealth project at the moment. Todd, you know about it. So be on the lookout in August. I'll be sharing more about it, but just, follow me on LinkedIn and on Twitter. I think it's my handle that's on the screen at GeorgeCLC. And it covers a fair few things that we've talked about today. So be on the lookout.
I can definitely share it. That is a freaking awesome project. I'm eager for you to share it with the world. All right. Well, I see we're a little bit over time. Katie, anything you wanted to share? Final thoughts?
I just wanted to thank everybody in the comments. I wasn't able to participate because of an error, but there's so much great conversation and there were some great questions we didn't get to. So I just wanted to thank everybody who decided to tune in, especially until the end. I really enjoyed learning from you by reading what you had to say and the things that are, really making you think about communities these days. So thank you.
100%. Yeah. So I apologize. We didn't get to promote some of those questions on the screen, but hopefully the panel participants will be able to look in afterwards and maybe answer some questions as well. Brian, you're last up, my friend.
Yeah, I'll just do a quick thanks to you, Todd, and Jay as well for showing up at the airport. Thanks to all of you. I have listened to your interviews as well, and I appreciate all your different perspectives. And we all come from different places, and we have different viewpoints, but we're all, doing some great work. So it's nice to hear, what everybody else is doing in the industry. And then I'll just do, as I mentioned before, I'll be at the Community-Led World Summit in London in 2 weeks. So if anybody's heading to that, please reach out. I'd be happy to meet up and chat. So.
Tremendous. No, I'm so grateful for you all. Yes, thank you to everyone who tuned in on this, or if you've tuned in for a replay on YouTube or LinkedIn, we'd love to hear from you. Please drop in a comment, give us a like, share it with somebody that you think will be interesting, share it with a CEO because I think it's a very relevant conversation for them. And in the meantime, please be good to yourselves, take some time off, recharge the batteries, have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with the next show, and keep building wonderful communities. Have a great weekend.